Welcome, everybody, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today, we're talking with a bunch of different people about this crazy experience we had running a 40-person team, a AA-sized game jam during Ludum Dare 55.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Amazing. In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. This is a mostly unedited recording of a live event we host here in a Discord every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so feel free to swing by and join us for the next one. I am, as always, your host, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster of the Indie Game Academy and the purple wizard of the game industry. And joining me today is going to be a couple people, but first of all, we have Rick Williams. Rick was what do we call you? Chief of Tech, I guess? Head of Engineering?
I kind of started out with a more producer role, kind of like organizational structure, and then led into lead engineering when our initial lead kind of couldn't make it. So I'm just like, all right, step in.
Yes, yeah. A producer, a technical producer. Maybe you're a technical producer, head of technical producing. I don't know, something like that. Awesome. Well, yes. So we had this. We actually had a crazy experience over the last weekend. I am kind of sick, if you can hear it in my voice, and just a little bit exhausted. I'm sure Rick is feeling similarly. Rick is literally moving in 4 hours too, which is insanity to me. We decided that we wanted to gain some experience in large-scale teams. Rick is now showing us a video of his completely empty space. A bittersweet moment. We had this crazy experience. I originally had an idea to gain a little bit of experience on a larger team. Larger teams are harder for juniors and those who have not yet worked in the industry to access. Generally, if you're going to put together a team, you've got a team of like 4 to 5, maybe as many as 10 or 15. But even then, oftentimes people kind of drop off here and there. So we basically put forward the idea to the Indie Game Academy community that we wanted to run Ludum Dare with a massive team, big enough to justify an actual organizational structure, as well as departments. We wanted to have departments so that people could work together and experience what that's like, and then gain experience negotiating with other departments and working with other departments. And we sure as hell did, Rick, didn't we?
Yeah, we definitely did. That was fun. Communication worked really well too, like surprisingly well.
Yeah, it was so Rick was the very first person that I messaged about this, and full transparency before I get any further, Rick and then Niv, who unfortunately is not here today, who acted as our producer the whole time, absolutely built this thing. I basically wrote a single post and then they did everything else, and then I just made a cool game with everybody. So thank you to Rick and Niv. This whole process was fraught with a lot of learnings. I think it was definitely a little bit messy. And then it also took 2 weeks to get ready before we actually started the jam. So why don't you, Rick, tell us a little bit about that? Because that, I think, was largely in your hands, at least before I jumped in the second week there.
All right, so I'm going to preface this with the fact that the existence of the IGA community was the reason this was possible at all. So like all of the years of work that you've done, getting people in and getting to know each other, is the reason that we were able to muster this kind of group. But so you made the post, and then a bunch of people signed up and said, yeah, I'm in. So what I did was I started keeping track of like, okay, this guy wants to be an artist and they've expressed they want to do 3D. This guy wants to be, the audio lead. This guy wants to be the art producer. So like we kind of funneled into like who was going to take what role, and we tried to build a roster and a skill chart of like who we needed, so that we could say like, okay, we've got a fairly fleshed out team in one discipline or another. We broke it up into all of the departments. So there was the designers, and like you, Will, wanted to be lead for that. We had our engineers, we had our artists, our musicians, our writers, and because the team was so big, we floated the idea, hey, let's get a marketing department too. So we ended up with a marketing squad as well. And so with the whole process after we started to,
and a voiceover department.
Yeah, voiceover kind of jumped in there because everybody knew voice actors. So like they had some really quality talent jump in. So after we got an idea of what the org chart was, this is where I really got to give Navarian a shout out. She does like a lot of the the production stuff that's just like keeping everybody in the loop, keeping coordinated, keeping the administrative stuff, setting up the Discord, setting up the itch page, like making sure all of these things that need to get done that honestly are the things that I know need to be done and I appreciate it, but I don't like to do it. But she likes to do it, so that's awesome. So we ended up finding a good synergy. So the first step was we built the Discord and kind of gave it a basic layout. And then the approach was have a meeting between the producers, everybody who was going to be like kind of the highest level coordinators of things. Then we made sure that we had delegated heads of departments, right? So the art lead, narrative lead, design lead, etc. Like we knew what the hierarchy was. We had middle management established. And then we brought everybody into the Discord and told all the leads, hey, listen, have a meeting or do something with your team so that you understand what your team is capable of. And then we got the designers together and said, this is what we're going to build. We come up with the design and clarify the mechanics that we're going to want so that the engineering team could get some software architecture in ahead of time. So that's kind of when the jams officially started. There was a whole like 10-day period of pre-production where we assembled the org chart, figured out who was on what team, and then kind of predicted what kind of communication channels there would need to be, like the art integration, right? So like we had an art integration team where people on the art team who were familiar with the Unity engine would bring the assets in and get the prefabs set up for the engineering team. So the engineers didn't have to understand what the art was and make the prefab. We had the art integration team meet with the engineers and say like, hey, listen, I'm going to build this mechanic for you. You're going to be the one to use it. How do you want me to leave it for you? And that smoothed the process out so much because the engineers never had to get out of programming flow. So yeah, it was a flow. There was a lot, but we tried to predict as many communication channels as possible and told people you can expect to experience this kind of need to communicate, and here is your point of contact. And we gave a name, and that really made a huge difference with a team this size. So it wasn't complete chaos. Like a lot of communication happened outside of those parameters, but we were given a skeleton to deviate from, and then everybody got a chance
to game,
and then we made a game.
Yeah, it's maybe I should have started with this. The game. So as far as the amount of polish we wanted to put into the thing, I think we all wanted a little bit more polish. But as far as it goes, it's gone really well. We've had, like I said, we had an actual marketing department. They've been going hard this entire time. I see you, Amanda, in the audience. Amanda, thank you so much. Prayer hands. We wound up getting some comments from people from across the industry, including somebody from Ubisoft, which was really cool. We wound up placing in the top 10 for new and upcoming games on itch.io, which was really cool. We wound up with, like you just said, 120,000 impressions or something on the itch page, which is I don't quite understand how that's possible.
Maybe not the itch page. I don't understand it either. I was peeking in the marketing team chat and they were talking about like between all of their posts. There's been that many impressions for people. I'm sure one of the marketing people could break it down a little bit better. But
Amanda, if you have stats, tell us stats, and I'll pull it out. And maybe we'll pull you up to talk about marketing in a bit. So yeah, one way or another, the game I think went ultimately extremely well. I definitely think we missed the polish bar that we were really trying to go for. So I'm sure we'll talk a lot about learnings in this episode of the podcast, ways that we could do this better. But I think what we definitely achieved is we managed to prove that you can get yourself what is effectively AA size studio experience with absolutely nothing. You don't need to, I guess we kind of had a vetting process. And we only took people on who had some amount of experience in Git and Unity. But still, for the most part, these are juniors, beginners. This is some people's first games. And yet now I would say, I personally feel like this. I keep saying this. I personally felt like I got a year of game development experience in about 3 days. I quite literally leveled up, like extremely so, from this tiny process. And that happened for every person on this team. 40 people all got to release a game together. And 40 people, like I saw, from the start of the thing to the end of the thing, went from like, developers, I know what I'm doing, to like game developers, like actual professional members of the industry. And that was super cool. And the game is done. It was a little shaky. Rick and I, I wound up like making myself sick, just working a little too much on it. I think Rick was still pushing changes in the past few days, but we managed to get the thing polished up and functional for the most part, which is awesome. And overall, incredible learning experience. So I want to talk. I want to get us into some of the lessons that we think we can bring to the audience. Niv, let me know if and when you have your mic on, if you're able to talk. Okay. Oh,
Can you hear me?
sweet. Yes.
I'm like, so
Hi. Do you want to talk about some of what you felt like went well for the project, and introduce yourself as well first?
oh yeah. Oh hey. So I'm Niv. I'm Claire. That's my real name. But I usually go by Niv online. And I was the producer alongside with Rick on the project, and it was just honestly it was a phenomenal experience. I thought it was kind of crazy. Like Willem was like, "Hey, what if like jam but like 30 people?" I'm like, "Oh my god, yeah, crazy!" Like it was absolutely nuts. But super, super fun. And then that 30 people ended up being like 50 people by the end of it. Like, so I've never had to run two different Discords for one game jam before, but we ended up having two Discords because we brought in voice actors and it was already like 50 million like things going on in the other Discord. So I was like, all right, we're just not gonna add to this chaos. So yeah, I mean honestly it was a fantastic experience. I think that
Yeah.
the biggest takeaway for me was honestly, and I say this quite honestly, when you build a community of people that are all on board about, supporting each other and caring about each other and being kind to one another, which is like the center of IGA's main tenets, that is the foundation for being able to throw something like this together and have it be as wonderful as it was. Like, there were no egos involved. There was nobody like being snippy with one another. I mean, this is a high stress thing, and I mean, I've had great experience on game jams. I've had bad experiences with game jams, and this was a phenomenal experience. And I think that really, really goes to show just like basically the culture that was built here, because that was the basically the seed of what allowed this to be so successful and so wonderful. So that was honestly, my biggest takeaway from the whole weekend.
Yeah, I felt exactly the same, and it's wonderful to hear you echo that. I have always felt this is one of my core beliefs about team building, and that is the culture that you create ahead of time is a lot of. It's almost like your FAQ or something like that. It's like the foundational part of your game, maybe. Having a good culture and having people who respect each other and have learned to talk to each other well without being rude, who've learned to say things like, "Hey, I really need this from you as soon as possible," but do that kindly and with empathy. Building that culture well ahead of time, I think, pays so many dividends and ultimately smooths out the process so much. Because even when people are short and upset, I know I was getting a little grumpy towards the end. We still largely, are able to communicate effectively and not take things personally and be kind almost entirely. And that was pretty amazing and is one of my favorite parts of this experience.
Yeah, I want to
Yeah,
make a
I definitely agree. It really is just phenomenal. And if you see just the energy of like people just wanting to continue to do stuff together and supporting each other, it just really was phenomenal. So, I mean, I think some of the key takeaways is, I mean, of course, there's always things you can do better, right? You can always kind of think about game design, like as far as the whole thing all coming into all these different pieces together. Definitely, we learned a lot of lessons there, I think, on how these different. I mean, game jams don't have departments usually. You know what I mean? Like, you don't usually full art department and a full marketing department and a game design department and an engineering department in a game jam. Like, that's insane. So the fact that there's definitely like, I think, ways we could have probably communicated better so we're all on the same page. Because there was definitely like, I mean, a bunch of different people are all having ideas of what does what and what means what. And I think we did decent at putting all those pieces to match each other. But definitely a challenge to get 50 people cohesively moving in the same direction on the same vision when you literally only have like hours to conceptualize a whole project. So so that was definitely a challenge. I think we did pretty well considering. I mean, when you look at the assets that were done, like all the 3D modeling, all of the animations, all of
Yes.
the artwork, all of the narrative, like all of that was done and written in a way that could be implemented in a game in 72 hours is actually insane. Like actually crazy. So that is just a huge testament. Yeah, it was buggy. Yeah, it wasn't perfect. Yeah, it wasn't polished like we wanted it to be. But the fact we were able to get it all in the engine in that time was just, I mean, that's an accomplishment in and of itself. So that's, I mean, I know I'm just kind of, speaking accolades. I definitely think we could, we definitely polish it. We definitely make it better. But I think that for what we
Mhm.
did, it was pretty great.
Yeah, somebody in the chat, I'm going to give two stats that I'm particularly proud of. Somebody in the chat that I'll remind myself of here in a second. Victor, if we give each person $200 a day rate, this game costs $24,000 to make. And honestly, that's less because we had the build-up time getting ready for it. Rick and I were up heinously late one night and talking about how long it would take us to build this game if we were doing solo dev, because we're both partial to solo dev now and then. And we calculated it'd be about a year, probably, for just
900 man hours were put in, but you have to account for the fact that, like, I'm not a good musician, and anybody who's a well-practiced, solidly skilled musician, like, their 1 hour is worth like 8 of my hours if I tried to do the music.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so I would love to start talking learnings, because I think that's what's really going to apply to everyone. And I'll remind everybody, I'll say one more time, I guess, this is something that all of you can do. We're pretty confident that IGA wants to do more of this kind of thing. Ludendare, is Ludendare every 3 months or every 6 months? I think it's every 6 now, right?
Next one's October.
Yeah, next one's October. So yeah, I feel like once a Ludendare is like very realistic. I'm not going to commit to that quite yet because I need to sleep. But this kind of experience is something that all of you can have. I really think like the classic advice that we always give is work on games. Y'all have heard that before. If you listen to a single other episode of this podcast, you've heard that before. And one of the main ways that we advise people to do that is game jams. I also, however, as have Rick, as have Zniv, experienced crappy game jams. We've all had teams fall apart. We've all had people who like get egotistical or weird about stuff. So really maybe the first lesson in my mind is doing your proper setup and your proper expectation setting. And that's a really big one. So one of the things that I did in my very original post and that we continued to echo throughout the process was here are the exact number of hours that we're expecting from every person and which days we're expecting those on. And here's some of the work that we're going to expect you to do ahead of time. And here's some of the expectations that we have for what this game is going to be. So we didn't, we knew from the very beginning we weren't going to charge any money for this. Like we weren't going to try to sell it. So that way people can just be volunteer. We don't have to worry about like finances or anything like that. We knew that this was going to primarily be a learning experience, that it would be a success if we even finished the game. And then we knew exactly how many hours people were expecting to give. We knew we were going to give a couple hours ahead of time to do design. We knew we were going to give a couple hours on Friday when the jam kicked off, and then 8 hours both Saturday and Sunday, and then a couple hours on Monday to polish it up and release it. And all of that, I think, every expectation you set, as long as you aren't going really overboard, makes your team slightly more likely to all be in cohesion and for you to not lose people along the way, which is sort of the common starting problem of a game jam. So my first advice is just, you can do this, just properly expectation set and find the people who are willing to do it with you.
I want to comment on like what a lesson that I thought worked, and like one of the things that really enabled this to succeed once those expectations were set. It was the fact that almost everybody on the team had worked with at least a portion of the rest of the team. Mm-hmm. Like and there was like the time, I know that in like the IGA classes, like I teach the level 2 class. So on the engineering team, 5 of the 9 engineers were previous students of mine, which means we had 8 class sessions and 4 work weeks together, and then another couple of them had actually done an additional game jam with me after the class, and they came in. So we already had a strong amount of working rapport. So the people who were in the classes together knew each other, kind of understood each other and trusted. And then the same thing is you have the level 3 cohorts. So people have been learning and already knew each other well. And because they've learned together, they also had a fundamental, like a common understanding of the way projects came together. So we were able to work together well because we didn't have wildly different ideas and expectations of what the process was going to look like.
I love that. Yeah. So people are asking if we're doing questions. Yes, absolutely. Leave your questions in the chat. We may not do it quite as formally as other episodes. One of an audience member, Darian, says, yeah, I'm a programmer, but I'm not sure I have the confidence to jump in a game jam. I hear that so often. And I hear that also about applying for jobs and just life, things. I'm not confident enough yet. My foundational belief in confidence is that y'all should still be scared. Y'all should still be like, I don't know if I'm ready for this, because that's the little voice that makes sure you do it right. That's the little voice that makes sure you step up to the occasion and kick ass. All right, now I'm gonna stop being aspirational, and I want us to get into those deep learnings. So, Rick, let's talk to all the engineers for a bit. You were an engineering manager on here. You worked with a 40-person team. There's a little bit of stress. Tell me about what you think you can apply and teach the audience from a 72-hour AA game.
Okay, so planning. Absolutely plan your project. We had a full software architecture diagram that explained how all of the systems were going to communicate. It didn't necessarily say like we knew that we were going to have isometric WASD movement, so similar to Baldur's Gate. We knew that we were going to have enemies. We knew that we were going to like enemies in a combat system. We knew that there would be like lore things you interacted with. So what we did was we defined what the systems were, put them in their bubbles, and then very clearly specified the interaction pathways, the integration endpoints. Mm-hmm. And the very first thing we did as a team was we all got into Git, which I'll talk about merge conflicts in a second. But we got into Git, practiced our Git workflow, and we just stubbed out. We created all of our scripts ahead of time, and we stubbed out the functions that would exist so that people could work in their own bubble, their system that they owned, and they would not be tempted to go in and like modify somebody else's script because they needed to add that function, because we predetermined how that interaction happened, and then they could just add the function call and just trust that the person who owned the other system would fill it in with the right scripts. So that ended up working really well. We also sat down and had an entire hour-long conversation about merge conflicts and how they happen, like what a merge conflict is, how they happen in Unity, how you prevent them, and what we were doing to be proactive about it. And we formed a whole strategy around it. And I'm super happy to say, I'm so proud of the team. We had 0 merge conflicts among the engineers. And I was like so thrilled. Like everybody killed it with that. So I am super proud of them.
Amazing.
Definitely planning is the number one takeaway.
Totally agree. So there's a concept called vanity metrics, Rick, which are metrics that are kind of fake in that we just say to sound nice. And the fact that you had no merge conflicts on the engineering team is very nice, and I'm very proud of you. We had plenty of merge conflicts outside of it, though. I'm not belittling your accomplishment. That's awesome. Yes, I totally agree. That planning was a big part of what worked well. I actually think that a strong org chart and strong areas of ownership is one of the big takeaways too. This is literally this person's thing. I think that the main thing that everybody got practice with really was, working within a team, which I guess is what should have been expected. But the fact that, you couldn't just be like, the fact that you were just in a little tiny room and you're like, what do you think about adding this? And then somebody else is like, yeah, sure. The fact that you actually had to go literally get approval from Eng or like from the narrative team or like from the designers, like, oh, I'm pretty sure Goblin owns that. You got to go ask Goblin. And then you have to like find the Goblin and wait for him. That was a fascinating experience that I think you don't really get until you're on a team that big. All right, so Niv may have to go here in a second. They are on their phone and it has about 5% battery. So Niv, I would love to get what did you learn as a producer that you can teach other producers about? And then maybe give a little goodbye in case the phone dies.
Hey, yes, sure. I think I really want to touch on marketing before this phone taps out because I'm at 3%. And honestly, so I think that marketing is often an overlooked portion of game development, and people just don't people think about oftentimes, solo devs or like indie devs or people just getting started or just doing hobby stuff or game jams or whatever. They don't even think about marketing. And I understand that, but I mean, when you look at big studios, like 30 to 50% of their budget is dedicated to marketing for a reason. And I think that one thing that super excited me about it, I'd love Amanda to chime in on this. She was a phenomenal part of the marketing. Huge. And it had an impact. We have more hits coming in from LinkedIn because that's where our marketing team decided to do their marketing campaign was from LinkedIn. We had more hits on our LinkedIn campaign and views on our page from LinkedIn than any other source. And that just is a testament to how powerful marketing can be, and getting the name out there. Our marketers were just shouting to the rooftops, hey, this game's going to be great. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know, but they sure as heck hyped it up, and it was successful. So I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways. I know that's not production related necessarily, but it is a huge part of of game development and like planning a marketing campaign and getting the word out from day one. Like you don't have to have a completed game to start marketing. You shouldn't have a completed game to start marketing. You should start marketing the moment you have a concept, you know? So I just think that's a huge takeaway because it was
Yeah.
very successful. We got 70,000 impressions from like 2 posts or something, or from like a couple, like I know Amanda was talking about like 50,000 impressions. Like it was crazy. And we got attention from like Larian and Ubisoft. It was nuts. So
Yeah.
anyway, so that's my big one. As far as production, communication was definitely challenging. I mean, I was running around, like you were talking about getting approval from those departments. Well, the first night I was literally sitting in all the different voice chats and listening to the conversations just so I could catch these conversations happening. And then I realized 3 different teams were designing islands on the first night. I was like, y'all, all 3 of us are having the same conversation in different rooms. Let's not. Let's get us all on the same page. So that's when we kind of like jumped in together. And then I mean, production is really about, you need to know what your other teammates need to be supported. And so you need to know like who needs what in order for them to do the best they can do. And I think that's a huge part of it. And I think, having this experience, we can definitely learn from that about like, what does audio need to be able to do audio things? What does art need to be able to do art things? Like, because narrative drives a lot of that. And game design drives a lot of that. So I think it's just like coordinating all that stuff is a big part of it. But my biggest takeaway, honestly, was the marketing side. So I have 1% left. I love you all. It was super, super, super fun.
Salute to you,
And I
Niv.
definitely would love to keep in touch with all y'all. It was just wonderful.
Thank you, Niv.
Amazing. Yeah, I want to echo it and maybe generalize the lesson a little bit. I think like don't underestimate the power of the other people. There's like a really natural phenomenon that happens with humans where we assume somebody else's area of expertise is easier than ours. Like I feel like everybody does that. We're like, oh, that's not that hard. I could do that. But then you start to do it and you hit that classic Dunning-Kruger moment where you're like, holy shit, there's so much to this. And that's part of why large teams are amazing and powerful. And so marketing team, hell yes. Like, I'll speak on that more in just a moment. But marketing team is amazing to have, but then all of the teams were amazing to have. And getting so many people's areas of expertise that I know nothing about was amazing. And then for those producers, being that glue that makes sure all these brilliant people who are working in disparate areas can actually communicate and not fall to pieces was what Niv, you did so well. That was so incredible. For marketing, I want to echo that marketing was amazing, and I want to tell you why I think it was so amazing. I like to talk about how energy is one of the most important resources on your team. Time, very important. Money, very important. But if your team is not energetic, engaged, excited, all the time and the money in the world won't result in a good game, right? So having your team pumped up and enthusiastic is a huge part of what delivers an incredible project, even if it's not games, but definitely in games as well. This is a creative field. And what I would say marketing managed to do, like, we're not selling this game. We're not like, we're not making money from this. We're like maybe gaining a tiny bit of notoriety, but like for the most part, we're not getting like material gain from this game. But what we definitely got was a bunch of really excited, energetic, high morale people. And marketing was a huge part of that formula because we're working on a brilliant game. And before we even have a functional version of like the movement, we're getting posts about how beautiful this game is going to be and about how cool it is and sharing our art with other people and seeing people's responses. And that overdrive of morale was palpable on the team. And that I think is something I'll never forget. So find marketers even for your game jams. And they love that because just like you're getting experience in your department, they're getting experience in their department. So find some junior marketers, find some people who are excited to share your content, bring them in, include them in decisions, include them in your team, and your projects will be better for it, even if you're not selling them, even if they're not for material gain.
One of the things I want to talk about with having the marketing team on it, like it's great to give the marketers the outlet to practice and develop their skills. But there's also the element of, even if you're a non-marketer, you have to think about how your game is going to be marketed and how you can provide resources and content to the marketing team. So like the engineers, like when we had funny bugs or something, like I think there was one video where we were play testing with an enemy and it was moonwalking because we faced it the wrong way. We took a video of that and that made content for a post. So whether you're in audio or engineering or writing or anything, you can come up with stuff that you can feed into the marketing team, and to have that practice and thinking about it because you actually have an outlet. Just be like, hey, let's funnel this to the marketers. Like helping to practice meeting your marketing team in the middle can really make a difference on how much your marketing team has to work with. So that was a benefit for everybody who wasn't on marketing simply because marketing was there.
100%. And I think having those embedded marketing team members, like allies, I'm not talking. I think marketing winds up being one of the departments. There's a few of these, and it's a shame. Marketing winds up being one of those departments that kind of gets kept on the outside almost. It's like, oh, you're just supposed to like post cool stuff about our game. But like pull those people in as much as you can and actually make them a part of the process. Because it's very true. You get so much benefit out of it. And for all of you indies, that social media, like guerrilla marketing, is going to be the only way you get sales. Sorry, but you're not going to compete with the big companies on actual marketing dollars. You have to do it, scrappy for you to really get noticed. And 0%, I'm exaggerating a tiny bit, but 0% of games that don't put effort into marketing get noticed. Like, it just almost doesn't happen. It does now and then, but those are unicorns and you can't guarantee your strategy on them. So find those people who love to market and involve them, and then be grateful for them when they do it. All right. I want to talk about design learnings for a little bit because, yeah, I have some. So I acted as design lead and then creative director on this, which was so cool, and I'm so grateful. I keep saying this. I feel like really privileged to have been trusted with that position, and learned a lot. But there's a bunch of stuff I can absolutely apply to design. I'm not exaggerating. I feel like I just gained a year of experience. I think the biggest thing that I want to give to designers is your design documentation. So when you're actually putting together what the game should look like, needs to be exacting. It is really, I know when I was a junior designer, and I would give design docs and I would get this exact feedback, because I've been getting this feedback for 10 years. I would be like, well, like, it's games. We're going to be flexible. Like, this is going to change. I can't tell you exactly what the right number is right now because we haven't even tested it with real people yet. And that is true. But if you aren't exacting with what your design looks like and giving exact numbers, exact behaviors, this is exactly how it should work, then you're not going to get the version of the game you're imagining. And then you're also going to need to change the design later to get closer to what you're imagining or closer to what the player wants. Designs will always change. I want to be clear about that. They should change. Game development is about iteration. But giving everybody an exacting version of your design documents is part of what keeps the team cohesion straight, keeps the game being built the way we're all imagining it. And then also it's part of what makes the entire team more functional and more efficient. Because if we're going back and forth about how design needs to work because it wasn't clear in the documentation, it's just a ton of wasted time.
I want to make a comment, from the engineering perspective on evolving design. One of the things I would add if we when we run this again, what I would want is a dedicated software architect to the designs, because in the role that I took, I was doing kind of the team production as well as trying to architect the way that the software would work and function and flow. But the kind of split, you need somebody who can like just completely focus on the change in the design and how this is going to work in an under the hood standpoint, whereas the actual production and coordination of people's efforts needs to that's its own bandwidth stream, its own stream of consciousness. Like, you definitely, on a team this size with evolving design, you need to have somebody who can just sit down and get into deep work states without having to constantly be in communication with people. That's a 100% learning that I took away from this.
Huge one. Yeah. And I don't want to say that I'm bad-mouthing our designers too much or anything like that, because we did a phenomenal job. And, our entire design team, much like you, Rick, I had taught, I think the majority, maybe all of them. No, I don't remember. At least in some form or another, I've been connected with these people before. And many of them hadn't, or some of them hadn't worked in design before. So this was definitely, a more junior team. We're all learning together. And so these learnings are partly for me as well. But that said, definitely harder, more exacting design specs is a huge one that I'm going to take away from this, that I want all of you as designers to take away. I think the game would have turned out 10 times better if we had not even knowing what the final versions were. We could still get it wrong, but as long as those first versions were exacting, and then we could have changed from those first versions later.
Yeah, scope specs, like maximum number of lines in dialogue and maximum size for areas, or estimated size. Like, I think that goes with the pacing of the game, and that should be conveyed to the people who are just going to take creative liberties if it's not specified.
Yeah, and then the other half of this is the designer's dilemma. This is another one that I've experienced my entire career, and other designers will tell you the same. We as designers, so a designer who is utilitarian is the wrong one. A designer who is too controlling over what the design is a bad designer, in my opinion. There should be ideas coming from everywhere, and designers are very much sort of conduits for the team's creativity. But, and here's the big but. The design is still sacred. Something that we definitely experienced this time around was having other departments come up with designs and just sort of changing it without design approval. And that's partly because the specs weren't exacting. And that's something that happens all over the industry, even with professionals. And the problem with that is the exact same thing. Suddenly, two different teams are on a disagreement with what the design actually is. And then, the engineers who are building the tooling don't know what the hell to build. Or like something that happened with us, like there were some things that we didn't communicate with the narrative team properly. So they wrote some dialogue that expected a feature that didn't exist and had never been designed. So there's two halves to it. You got to be exact about what your designs are. And then you have to be a little bit of a jerk, 10% jerk. You have to really just follow up with those designs and make sure that everybody is following them. And if changes are proposed, you need to take it that way. This is a proposal for a change. Let me consider if we can do it. And then you also need to say no if we just can't do it. We did a lot of saying yes, and then adding more work to Rick's plate. But it went well. It went well. That's my design lecture. Exacting specs, and then make sure design specs are getting followed. All right, so what else can we talk about here? Rick, what is something that you feel like the layman, anybody here, could take away from this? What are some of the other lessons you'd like to talk about here? Oh, we also have questions, I guess.
Let's do some community questions.
Yeah, let's do some
I'll
questions.
think about that answer.
Yes, we'll do that for the end. Let's see. What's the first question? We've had a really active chat. Oh, also wanted to call out, Amanda found us stats. 70,000 impressions between on our marketing, between her, Constantine, and Ulysses, which is our marketing team. And then assuming my impressions, which they can't look at, it should be about 120,000. So yeah, we got about 120,000 impressions on our marketing for this game. Pretty cool. All right. Victor, I'm just going to ask this one because I think it's a good question. Why didn't we have a QA department? What do you think, Rick?
Because there has to be something to QA before you have a QA department.
I do think, honestly, we could have a QA department next time. I don't think anybody really volunteered to do QA, right?
The QA was something that we figured we would be hitting scope towards the end of the jam, and then everybody would kind of cumulatively come together and create the bug reports. So it was kind of assumed that everybody would be on QA and just in some way working. But you're right, there was no QA coordination. We did have one of our people, Torin. He volunteered to become QA PM, and he's curating the bug list for us and making sure that the right people get notifications about bugs. So Torin stepped up for that.
Yeah, I honestly think QA department is great. I think mostly we didn't have one. A little bit of what Rick's saying. I think also there wasn't anybody who's like, I'm QA, I want to do QA. In the volunteers list. Like, this wasn't us assembling the perfect team. This was us saying, hey, who wants to work on this? And then assembling a team out of that list of people who volunteered. So yeah, I mean, my short answer is yes, QA good. And I think it would have really helped for us to have 1, 2, 3, 4 or so QA people who were just checking for bugs. I think in a jam setting, it's a little bit harder to utilize them because mostly everybody's cranking away on just trying to get features working before they're polishing.
I do think there was something we had talked about with the graduated feature list where we figure out like what are going to be our incremental milestones. We kind of work towards that, but I think that there's a more refined approach that we could take where we sync up between the rest of the teams, like from the design standpoint, what makes sense as the first thing to do. Like we were talking about how it wasn't until the 11th hour of the jam that we got the cutscene system in, but maybe we should have started with cutscenes where, you just walk up and you walk across a room and then you get to the end of the game, which is the win condition, and then flesh out everything in between from there. Being able to open that up so you can do QA. I think if we make that an important pillar of our design process or our production process next time, we should absolutely just get the QA team on board and include
100%
them
agree.
for every build.
Yeah, I think I'm actually surprised I didn't say this earlier with my little design learnings. The other design learning, because this is always the design learning, is reduce scope. We thought we were reducing scope by making a simple combat system. We thought we were reducing scope by having only one variable. We thought we were reducing scope by only having 8 NPCs, which wound up being 5 in the end. But all of those things, like, it's really hard to estimate exactly how long things will take. But that's part of why you get that advice all the time where you're supposed to multiply your estimates by 3 to 4. Like, actually do that. The optimistic approach to how much we can build, I think, is like wonderful in many ways. My partner and I were actually just talking about this, where optimism helps bring people together and gets the energy flowing, but optimism is also really bad at being pragmatic and like utilitarian. And that's what you need to get a project done on time. So I personally haven't yet found the balance, but absolutely reduce scope. Estimate when you design something and you have a timeline, make the design such that you think you can finish it halfway through the schedule, even less, honestly. And then you'll probably finish just in time. All right, Petunio has a question, which is kind of an interesting one. It seems like the theme of the jam was mostly ignored. Was the expectations for the theme once it sort of... Wait, I think I misread this. So if we're doing questions, folk may or may not notice that the theme of the jam was more or less ignored. Was the expectations for the theme once it sort of came up? What do you think, Rick?
So we knew that the amount of coordination that would be involved with this number of people meant that we needed to like go through the pre-production for a pretty substantial skeletal structure. And the idea was to skin the game with theming in mind. And this went heavily to, very specific mechanics and the narrative storytelling and the way that the art came together. So from an engineering standpoint, we had to like understand our software architecture and kind of get people synced in, because if we wanted to achieve a game of this scope in 72 hours, like we absolutely needed more time to think about it than just that 72 hours. So yeah, it was just because we were struck with limitations on what would make this a practical project.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you say the theme got ignored. That means that it definitely didn't shine through, which is a bit disappointing, but such is life. We had to design the game and get it mostly ready to be built before the jam started. And we did that knowing that we were going to get a theme, and we actually left holes in our designs to slot the theme into, which we did do. So for instance, like when you're walking across bridges, you're summoning them. When you're finding lore, you're summoning a spirit. The theme of the jam was summoning. And a couple of other ways. The narrative was pretty heavily focused on summoning. Combat was supposed to be, for instance, summoning creatures to help you, but that was just way out of scope, so we didn't do it. So I think like it is, I would say it's a bit of a trade-off. Being able to build such a huge team required us to set up ahead of time, which required us to be a little bit less flexible in the design.
Yeah, I do want to clarify for anyone who's listening and thinking, oh, they started before the gym. We figured out what we wanted to do. And, we did have some of our people prototyping the mechanics. Like we used some plugins like the dialogue system and Sonity. And we did put like our sound team like on a project of like, okay, learn how to do it and here's your parameters. And they prototyped it in a separate environment. But we actually did the implementation upon the start of the jam, sticking to that limitation. So if there was like involved learnings, we encouraged people to like do all the problem solving ahead of time so that we could focus on the actual execution during the jam time period.
Yeah, basically we designed ahead, we built during, which I think this team size would be impossible without that, to be honest. Or at least really, really, really hard. Next question, which I think is a good one. Victor says, was this team size a good idea? In other words, would you guys achieve a better game with fewer people?
This was an absolutely wonderful idea, and we got so much done so fast, and I am very, very excited about it. I also think a team this size, we touched on this earlier, it's a chance for people to get that AA size studio experience without that prerequisite of being hired by a AA studio. So this is something that outside of somebody who's been employed in the industry, it's uncommon experience to have.
I fully intend to talk about this in my own job interviews, like 100%. Next time I'm looking anyway. It was phenomenal. I learned a lot. I do think there's something worth saying that, for instance, the last time I did Ludum Dare, we had a team of, I think it was 9, and we placed 76th out of 1,700 games. So we placed, I think that makes it top 5%. Meaning we kicked ass. We had a really great game. To be totally honest, I love everybody on the team. I doubt we're going to hit quite that high. And that's because the game was just not as polished. So if we're talking strictly placing better, we did better with a small team. That said, this game is astronomically higher scoped. It is a much more ambitious project, and I would argue is more valuable to people's portfolios, resumes, and just individual learning than the last game I worked on. So it's a bit of a trade-off, as with most things in life. Was it smoother than a small team? No. Were we capable of having a more cohesive design and faster communication? No. But did we build something that we couldn't have possibly built with a smaller team? Yes. All right. What do you think about learning Git, Rick? Another question: how to approach learning Git? If the best practice learning to use and break things, is there another way?
Okay, so be mentorable when it comes to Git. If you have never used Git before, you can be onboarded into Git, but don't make any presumptions. Like, use the GUI that they recommend for you. We were onboarding people in with GitHub Desktop. So we had people who had never used Git before, but we got them successfully working in the repo with about 20 minutes of explanation because we were able to guide them through the tools. And don't be afraid of it, right? Like, just because you've never used it, you've either never used version control or you're used to Perforce or some other thing. Don't be afraid as long as you've got experienced people around who can help walk you through it. Because people are more than happy that you're taking off, some load of the work. So when it comes to that, don't be afraid to learn it, listen to people, and take the advice, and just take it at face value, because there's a lot of things you don't understand regarding merge conflicts and things like that.
Yeah. I agree. I think my learning for everything has always been don't be scared of it and just try it. I think Git is one of those things that can be really scary. I have a fun anecdote. When I was working on the cat games for a while, I somehow included the entire repo of somebody else's example project in my own repo, and I never figured out how I did that or how to undo it. So it's still there. It was an open project, so luckily that was fine. So sometimes crazy shit happens. Git can be really confusing, but it is so much more valuable to just be like, I got to figure it out, than it is to be scared of it, So don't be scared. Just try it. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Most of the time, people are going to help you figure it out. All right, Victor, continuing to come at us with the hard-hitting questions. I have learned that Victor is a very matter-of-fact guy. Victor says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well executed was the game at the conclusion of this jam? As I understand, it has been updated over 36 hours after the jam concluded and still remains buggy. So, number 1, Ludum Dare is pretty chill about people continuing to polish stuff as long as you're not adding features and stuff like that. They even like you to do that. The audience likes it when you fix bugs and things like that. So I would say people adding polish after the jam is closed is okay. That's pretty expected. Just don't add features and stuff. As far as the first part, a scale of 1 to 10, how well executed was the game? I'd say it's hard to say. If I'm talking about how amazing of a game is this, how sellable of a game of this, it's probably a 6 out of 10. I think it really needed a lot more polish. We really needed to do a much smaller scope. I think I, at least personally, got overconfident because of the team size. I was like, we could do so much. But if we're talking about learning and hitting the main objective, which was for everybody to experience working in a AA studio, I think it's a 10 out of 10. So it's a bit of a trade-off. I also think next time we do this all together, which we'll do it 10 times better. It'll be smoother. We'll lower the scope a little bit, and then we'll be able to hit that 10 out of 10 quality level. So my answer is, yeah, we had some issues. We didn't get everything polished, but this game turned out amazing. I'm happy with it.
I think at the actual moment of sending it out, there was a lot of bugs that made it so you couldn't actually finish the game. And then there was certain UX things that we hadn't had a chance to thoroughly test. So you were trying to walk along a path, but then you got buried in trees and you couldn't see, and people were just like, where do I go? So that's kind of one of those things where we hadn't had much of a chance for the rigorous UX feedback. So
Mhm.
we've been able to make UX changes because ultimately I think people will be more appreciative of a more polished game that's more enjoyable rather
Mhm.
than, oh, you completely cut off right at that deadline and now you have nothing but something that is unrefined jank.
Yep.
The amount of polish is what's going to make this a huge difference, even if people do some part-time work on it in the days following it.
I agree, and honestly, that extra polish is continues to be great experience for the team as well. It's essentially like a live ops period, or live services period for your game. Like your game is now live, and also you're making changes to it, which is how most games function these days. There's very few games that just release and then drop it, and usually they only do that if the game really doesn't perform well, if it sucks. But anyway, Surya's got a question. I think we'll do like two more. We're a little bit over, but we started late, so I want to make sure we're answering a good number of questions. Surya asks, were there some people on the team whose contributions didn't get fully included for production reasons? There were definitely some. We actually have voiceover, which we are going to plug in. So I don't know. We're doing that after the jam closed, I guess, because we want those voiceovers to be in. I think maybe there was some art that didn't get in. For the most part, about 90 to 95% though of what we built is in the game.
I would say we got partial from everybody. So,
Mhm.
with the art assets, we did our best to incorporate every art asset that the art team provided to us. The level designer was, working full speed. So I think we got just about every environmental piece in, and we did our best to get all of the UI aspects in. I know
Mhm.
that, from a sound standpoint, the actual function calls to trigger the sounds, there's a lot of them that are in the project, but we just need to like spec through the code because, we worked on the features up to the very end that, the actual sound audits to decide, put this sound here, put this sound here. So there is sound that exists in the game that we just have to throw the triggers in. So in the current build, you don't experience them, but they are technically in the game. And then from a design standpoint, we scoped back on some things. So the designers planned some things that were really cool that, we did end up cutting for scope.
Yep.
In that capacity, I would say that everybody got partial implementation, but we did really strive to make sure that at least something from everybody was showcased in the game.
Yep. And we did finish, which I mean, success. Kat asks, did you have a UI UX person on the team and how did you handle accessibility? Uh, Two things. We didn't have a UI UX person. We realized that was a huge weakness about 4 hours in, and we sure wished we had a UI UX person. So join us for the next one, Kat. As far as handling accessibility, because we didn't have somebody who was focused on it, it was very much just like ad hoc. I actually feel like I probably wound up taking on the majority of the responsibility for that after features were implemented. And if I wasn't like managing people doing meetings and stuff, which was, by the way, the majority of the jam was just in different meetings talking with people. Very much mimics a big studio. But if I wasn't doing that, I was actually running through the game and making small tweaks to make sure it was more understandable and more accessible. I think we still didn't quite hit the quality level on that front as I wanted to, which is why I would love a UI UX person next time.
The majority of my jam was siloed in the engineering chat.
Yeah, we just kept Rick in the corner and kept feeding him problems to solve, and then the problems kept coming back out solved. So it was great. All right, I think we're just about done. Maybe we'll do one more. How did you guys optimize in terms of coding and design? What do you think, Rick?
How did we optimize? So I honestly, I was really doing my best to not micromanage the programmers. So I was meta managing the systems, and I just wanted to make sure that the people who owned the feature were the ones doing the implementation. If you were working
Yeah.
with the NPCs and something needed to happen with the NPCs, I redirected there. We didn't really have time for thorough code review processes, so there is very likely to be things in there that are not optimized, but that's simply because each engineer had their own complete ownership of their feature. And as long as, at the end of the day, we're playing it and we're like, "Feels all right." We just kind of took it at face value. So yeah, I can't say if anything is like super optimized or not, but the right answer for that would have been a code review process, which we just didn't have time for.
Yeah, it's hard to do. Honestly, it's hard to do polish of any form, whether that's for optimizing code or whether that's for optimizing design in a jam. Like you just generally don't have time for it. Something that I'm going to try to do. This is something we all said we were going to do, and then we just overscoped, so it didn't happen. This is a learning from previous jams of mine that I'd recommend to everybody. Set yourselves actual deadlines and do the actual production cycle. Meaning, get yourself a playable prototype, then get yourself a playable alpha, then get yourself a playable beta, and set actual deadlines for those and set them way ahead of launch of release. So like my ideal for the classic like 72-hour Ludum Dare is that your design is finalized Friday night, like finalized. By the end of the day on Saturday, your game is in alpha, done in alpha, meaning all of the core features are in the game. So anything you design needs to be like buildable by Saturday night. So you're really designing a 24-hour game. Then Sunday night is about getting to beta, which means you're now at feature complete. Everything is built, and all content is in, even though there might not be polish. Or there might be bugs and stuff. And then you can leave your Monday, which is always kind of a half day because people are working and stuff. You can leave your Monday to polish and exclusively polish. That's my ideal. We didn't really hit that this time. We'll try better next time. But that's what I'd recommend. Design something that you guys can build, that your team can build with enough time to actually polish, because it does generally result in a much better game.
Yeah, I posted our initial production schedule in the chats here. So if you guys are listening and you're not a part of the live chat, you get to see fun extra tidbits during you actually look in the chat.
Yes. Yeah, come be in the chat. I think this is where we're going to cut it off. I keep meaning to say this. My other big learning for everybody is to try to design your games in a piecemeal way. Meaning, what is the first deliverable and how can we get our team playing and using and plugging things in as quickly as possible? So I think, for instance, next time I do design for something, especially for a jam, I'm going to try to design in a way so that we can get a first iteration of the game that allows other people to start playing and literally plugging in. So almost like an onion approach or an incremental deliverable approach, where we can, play as soon as possible is really the end goal there. And start getting other team members to contribute instead of just the engineers as soon as possible, so that the engineers aren't doing everything. Layering the onion, yes. All right, it is now high time. Rick, do you want to come up with some homework for them? Something they can do in an hour in the next week?
Oh God, some homework. I want you to imagine the role that you like to play in game development, and then I want you to imagine the deliverables that you create, and then think who is going to request them from you and who is going to use your deliverables, and think how can you ease that communication process from the person who's giving you what you need and the person who's receiving what you make. Like, what can you do to optimize that method of communication?
I love that. That's a great idea. So whatever your role or discipline is, if you're unfamiliar with what that means, that just means, the thing you do in games. You're a level designer, you're a systems engineer, you're I don't know, social media marketer. Whatever it is that your role actually is, imagine the different dependencies and actually write them down, the different team members that you would have to get work from or give work to, write them down, and then write a little bit about how you'd handle that relationship. That's a perfect idea, Rick. I love that. Give you a tiny bit of an idea of what it's like to work on a larger team. And if you are unfamiliar or unsure of what to write there, go and research. What does it look like to be a systems engineer? Who do you have to work with? What kinds of work gets delivered between you and other people? What are you responsible for versus what are they responsible for? Yeah, I love it. A communication pipeline document. That's what you owe us. In the next week, you've got 1 hour to write a communication pipeline document. You can tag us on LinkedIn at Indie Game Academy. We'll tell you you're cool. All right. You want to say any last minute things, Rick, before we say goodbye?
Yes. Play Child of Ruin. It's a fun game. It's a fun game that we made in a weekend, and we would love if you just experienced it.
I'm going to drop the link in chat. Why not? It's let's see, trendsharo.itch.io/Child of Ruin. We'll put the link down below. Oh, thank you, Constantine. Awesome. Go check it out. Yeah, we're really excited, and we will continue to polish it over the next week or two. We are doing a little bit of that live services thing, and we're really proud of what we managed, and we will do more of this. Actually, here's my last question for everybody. Put it in the chat for me, or just speak it out loud. Maybe tag us. if we did something like this in a more formal way and actually did rev share with the team, would you be excited about that? It'd be kind of messy. We'd have to set up some real strong contracts and decide exactly how it works. But like, assuming we can figure that out, if we wanted to do this again, but for rev share and actually try to release something that makes money, would you people want to do that? Seems like a lot of yeses.
Sliver of a pie that exists is better than the entire pie that doesn't.
That's fair. All right, I'm seeing a lot of yeses. That's awesome. Yeah, we're starting to lean something like this at the Indie Game Academy. So keep your ears open. And probably there's something to be announced pretty soon. All right, my final lesson is go make games. I think that's it. All right. Love all of you. It's been a wonderful day. It was such a pleasure to be able to talk about this. You got a last thing there, Rick?
It was a blast. I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, I really can't. Also, please, I feel like I got a little bit more persnickety towards the end because I was stressing. If I hurt anybody's feelings, please let me know. And I'm sorry that I did.
We were all on 5 hours of sleep for 3 days. So yeah.
Yeah, it was a tiny bit rough at the end, but it was good. It was good. And honestly, though, it really did emulate how the industry works. Right before launch is a stressful time. But sweet. I've had a wonderful time talking about this. I had a wonderful time working on it. You're going to hear more about it in the EDM Academy. We're thinking we're going to do some retrospectives and things like that. A little bit more formal than this. This was kind of impromptu. And just try to like bring the learnings and the upgrade that we brought to the team to our community. And then definitely we're going to try to do more stuff like this in the future as well. If you want to do the next one, somebody asked, would you do this with an 80-person team? Rick said yes. I would also say yes. Let's get 100 people. Why not? We'll figure out something that works.
That hot AAA.
Yeah, let's start targeting that AAA sized game jam next. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful day. As always, we'll be here again Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. There's links to join the Discord down below. See everybody next week. Adios.